Welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to introduce the third IWA Resource Recovery Conference. My name is Francesco Fatone, and together with my colleague and friend, we are going to co-chair this event that will engage and hopefully boost collaboration in the world of this team. A few words about the third IWA Resource Recovery Conference. First of all, why we are here. Here you can see, of course, globally, wastewater was clearly said to be an untapped resource, and also the Sustainable Development Goal number 6 is driving our actions, but also 100 million funding for innovation in water and circular economy projects have been delivered. For example, by the European Commission. We will hear later on a presentation from the European Commission about the impact of this huge funding, and hundreds of millions have been invested into water resource recovery facilities. For example, in the Aarhus water project, but also in other projects, we have also here a representative from Aarhus water utility. After this investment in research and investment in real facilities, we are still addressing barriers from a regulatory point of view, legislation point of view, standardization and social. And also, we are addressing proper value chain and market outreach. With this framework in mind, we can see that we have scattered steps towards standard practice. The motto of this conference is from research to standard practice. For example, we have in the Netherlands example of recovery potential that was considered at regional scale. We have examples of innovative sustainable planning, so we move from regional assessment to planning of infrastructure, but we have also example of innovation in legislation and regulation. This is an example from the new draft decree in Italy for sludge management, and in this decree you can see that recovery of biopolymer, cellulose, nutrient from sewage sludge has to be considered. Actually, we are very glad to say that this was introduced as consideration for the results of Innovation Horizon 2020 project. So the link, the science legislation link, is actually here demonstrated. But still, these initiatives are scattered. The systemic innovation, the systemic impact has to get together, has to be improved. And in this conference, this is our first day. This is actually a multi-stakeholder conference. In fact, in the organizers, you can find not only the scientific bodies, but European Commission, the Ministry of Environment, with, for example, the main European platforms about technology, about resources, about regulation, and association of utilities. So the full value chain is here present and will be active during this conference. Altogether, this conference is successful in terms of numbers. We got 350 abstracts from 43 countries. Around 350 delegates are expected. We will have 15 technical sessions, 5 workshops, 2 technical tours, 1 app. This will be very useful during this conference, and events to engage young water professionals. In this program, we'll have 7 plenary and 9 keynote speakers that will address sessions and their visions. And of course, we have to thank the sponsors that even in this case are representing technology providers and end users. So even in terms of sponsorship, we are going from the providers to the users. All this was possible thanks to the huge work of a great team, especially of young people, after the co-chairs that I was mentioning. So big thanks to these great collaborators. And I would like to conclude this opening with an example. Actually, what you find here, this table, are materials that have been recovered from wastewater. What you can see here is the result, for example, of a smart plant that is co-organizing this conference that has worked in full-scale plant in order to recover materials such as cellulose, biopolymers, nutrients, in energy and carbon efficient technologies to produce these products that you can see here. And outside this building, you can see this biocomposite. This biocomposite is cellulose, wood, plastic waste biocomposite that was then evaluated in terms of business. So when you talk about circular economy, we talk about innovation and about economy. So this will be also a very important topic of this conference. So the point is, how are we delivering circular economy to practice? Well, we think so, because this is so big that it was impossible to bring it here. So yes, I think that we are going to practice. And with this, we would like to convey this message. Coming together is a beginning, staying together is a progress, and working together is success. And an example is me and Didier. We were competitors to hold this conference together, and then we work together, and we hope that this conference will be a success. So thank you very much, and I hope all of us will have a very successful collaboration. Now, as institutional opening, we decided to have the Association of Italian Utilities that will give us a framework scenario and also which are the research and innovation needs. So it's my pleasure to introduce Renato Trusiani from Utilitalia. Utilitalia is the National Association of Water, Waste and Energy Utilities. It is also the governing member of the Italian Water Association. He's going to say us a few words about the Italian scenario. Thank you, Renato.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As it was said by Fatone, we associate the company operating in the field of water, solid waste, energy. And we are the 500 members serving a large part of cities, especially in the field of water solid waste. Italian member is a member of the International Association of Solid Waste, Gas Union, and of course in IWA, and we represent the Italian governing member of IWA. This conference addresses key issues for the activity of our member company and also for entire country. It is important for us. The service represented by Utilitalia have to do with water use, recovery of valuable materials and energy. All these activities are connected to the circular economy. A few days ago, the Italian government was changed. And in the program of the new government, it's clearly written, we need to promote technological development and the most innovative research as to make the ecological transition as effective as possible and direct to entire production system toward a circular economy. It is important that it is certainly an ambitious program, and we hope it will translate in real action with effects on industrial activities and on the life of the citizen. We will not like, because we have some years of experience, as already happened in the past, that end result of political wishes be only useless chat without practical result. In particular, the worst may be that the circular economy may be considered an useful tool to block activities in progress by postponing solution of the urgent problems in a far and bright, we hope bright, future. This problem is particularly present in Italy, not especially in water, but in the field of solid waste. For this reason, we believe that our works, which is strongly linked to solid scientific and economical basis, is very important. This is especially true for our country that has declared, as I said before, to undertake these new challenges. In conclusion, I wish everyone all the best in your conference work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renato. The next opening speech is from Francesca Mazzarella, that is the director of Fondazione Utilitatis. It is the Research and Innovation Foundation associated to the National Association of Utilities. So she will talk us about framework and the research and innovation needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Francesca Mazzarella. I'm the new director of Utilitatis, who is the research foundation devoted to investigate the utility sector, which include water, but also energy, and namely electricity distribution, gas distribution, and then also waste. The utility are involved in all the basically the value chain of the water sector since the very beginning. So since the supply, the sewage collection, the rainfall collection of the water, and the storage, the treatment, the transfer, the distribution, and then finally the retail of the water. So the problems and that the utilities has to face are very different and spread out in different also areas. As a foundation, we are all economists, and we basically mainly address economic problems in a broad sense related to the water sector. But there are key elements for the water sector that include other areas like public health, water conservation, environmental performances, which are more technical, engineeristic, and we have started to work on this topic too with external resources. Just to give you a glance on what are the key research points so far that have been discussed. There are mainly, as said, from the economic point of view, but I wanted to name these three. So the first one is the climate change and long-term investments, because due to climate change, we need to preserve more the water reservoir in order to cope with extreme events. And so it is needed more long-term investment planning, basically. Governance and regulation, which is a topic which is very important in Italy in this period. It has been discussed, but also in other countries, and is mainly due to the regulation of the water sector and the performances of the operator. And then last is sustainability and circular economy, so the sustainability of the life cycle and the circular economy of the water. And let me dig a little bit into these three topic, dig deeper. So in terms of long-term investments, as you see, these are the investments that are planned. This is an official source from the Italian Economic Regulation Authority. As you see, in 5 years from now, basically the investments will be doubled. And this is due to what I was saying before, the need of cope with possible extreme events. In Italy, there are also other problems that utility has to face in this respect, which in respect of the investment specific. So the timing, for instance, for obtaining the authorization, the lack of regional planning of the investments. And so there are other topics related to this. Governance and regulation was the hot topic and the debate in Italy, and it is important to have a distinction between what is the ownership and what is the operation of the water sector. And there are a lot of studies that underline what are the advantages or disadvantages of having a private, public, or a mixed ownership or operation of this in the water sector. And as you can see, in the OECD countries and in Europe, the situation is very very widespread, and there are different combinations of ownership and organization of the water sector. The last is the sustainability, because this is becoming very, very important, especially the key topic here is the circular economy. And because so in this moment, the linear approach of the water sector, where the water is sourced and is basically used in the four main sectors that are namely the agriculture, the municipality, industries, and environment, and then the water, the non-consumptive water is returned. But this is not sustainable in the long run. And so, circular approach the circular economy is becoming becoming crucial, and linked to this is the innovation in water technology, and especially in increasing the supply, such as to preserve the resources, collect rainfalls, and in order to ensure to have enough water reservoir for to clear the gap between supply and demand in water. So these were the main topic, the main research topic we have been working so far. So thank you, everyone, and we continue.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Well, what you mentioned is very relevant. We will have here a presentation from the President of European Water Regulators, and they will announce an innovation hub by WAREG that is going to host the innovation delivered by innovation projects in order to establish a discussion with the regulators. Because what has been told is that sometimes we don't speak the same language. So this link with the regulation, with governance, we will contribute to make them stronger. So we will hear Andrea Guerrini, the president of WAREG, presenting how we will work at the European level. So now we can move to the introduction from the main organizer. First of all, it's our pleasure to have here Diane Darras, the president of the International Water Association. We asked her to talk about a very challenging theme, that is the role of resource recovery from water within the circular economy. So here we have resources, circular economy. And Diane is going to tell us her thoughts about these keywords. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you very much. First, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm always been impressed by people of dealing with those topics. And when you ask me to give my thought on the circular economy, I first think that people of water professional are really used to circularity. Maybe in the drinking water you are much more linear, but when you go one day from the drinking water to the wastewater, you discover that the water is going again and again. So the cycle is something that normally water professionals are used to, and circularity is something we are used. However, I wanted to try to, if I manage to push the right, that's four thoughts? Okay. I want to try to find what does really circular economy mean, because we all discuss about that, but it's not so evident what do you mean by that, and probably if we ask you what is your definition, it could be a bit different. So I took the example which is given from an association which is called a circular economy, and they try to define what is a circular economy, and for that they went and asked people their definition. So you have different concepts, key element, and I am going to go through them to see what impact and do we as water professional, do we really answer to circular economy. What is interesting is that the first one is prioritize regenerative resources. I mean, it's also to use the right resources, and of course, is when we are when we compare to what we do as a resource recovery. Of course, we are already in that mood, is to use regenerative resources, to use the resources we have in the wastewater as a resource for the wastewater treatment already. And of course that it is very important. So it's one point of the circular economy. The second point is preserve and extend what's already made. I think it is very important to remind that too, that it's important to use what has been built, and in the water professional, for example, when we do networks, if we postpone the renewal, or if we can have good maintenance, we are doing that. And the economy in water is really an economy we try to work on 40 years of amortization, 60 years, 80 years, 100 years. Some pipes have been put 100 years ago. So we really also have that vision on. We don't destroy our investment. Most of us, we try to preserve and extend. So it's really our vision also. Use waste as a resource, of course. I mean, it's for us evident. We work with wastewater. So it's exactly what resource recovery is, and it's exactly where we are, because so it showed how we are in that topic. Rethink the business model. It's interesting because we start to discuss about economy. We start to discuss about economics. So, of course, one of the difficulty for us is that we are in difficult exercise. We need to have a battle against the price of the materials. So it's probably one of our main challenge is how do we create value? How the value of the materials are given? And rethink the business model is a key point. You said, Francesco, that regulators are important. I consider, and IWA, not me, IWA consider regulators and regulation a key point for us, because we need them. And I'm very happy that the WAREG representative will be there, or is there already, maybe, I don't know, is already. Because it's a key point, and IWA trust regulation and regulators to be key partners. We have been developing the documents, and we have now regularly regulators forum, and it's very important because we need regulation and we need regulators in order to help us to deliver the service, to help us to introduce the value of what we do, to help us, for example, to fight against leaks, because if they don't put that in the contract, if they don't recognize the value of fighting against leaks, if they don't recognize the value of getting the material, and we won't be able to do it. So rethink business model is very important, and it's one key of circular economy, and it's key for us. Design for the future is also very important, and it's something which can be challenging, because what are the conditions of the future? We know what is the consumption today, more or less what is the quality of the wastewater today, but the challenge is what will be next year, what will be in 10 years, what will be in 20 years. We build for future, and we are not sure. So probably we need to find more flexible design or anticipate more on the design. And it's a challenging aspect also for us. And last but not least, they put also two topics which are probably a bit helping us for the circular economy. It's incorporate digital technology. It's absolutely key for us also, that we know that it can help a lot. And collaborating to create joint value. And of course, that's what we do in IWA, but what the research program, what the European Commission has been also pushing in order to create value and to make people work together. So really finding the common language, but finding that language of circular economy. Clearly, the resource recovery cluster is absolutely in line of the philosophy of the circular economy. There is no doubt about it. It's exactly. Does it mean that it will be easy to work and we will have easily a business model? That's something different, because, as I said, the economy is not yet there. And I'm sometimes surprised that we speak about circular economy, because we don't see a lot of economy, or we don't have the tool for helping us. So it's more the visibility and the vision which is important in the word. Circular, surely. Economics are probably not yet there, and we need to help. What is the task of IWA through the cluster? It's not coming from me, it was coming from the people who built the cluster. I just took over again what they thought was important for the cluster. And of course, it provides science and technology basis we need to develop, and it's exactly what you are going to do during the coming days. There is lots of science and technology, and it's key. Encourage an appropriate policy and legal framework. It's what we were saying. We need the help for framework and for regulation and things like that. Of course, we need to help also to develop the market. That means we are expecting utilities to develop the pool side. The technology pushing, university and research is proposing solutions, but if there is no demand, solutions are there and they stay there. So it's absolutely necessary that utilities, helped by the regulation, can really ask and pull the solution. Stimulate discussions to establish clear situation where consumer profit. I think it is. It's very important also to understand that we will have to go more closer to our end users. It's not the common habit from utility to go and to discuss with the end user, but we will fail in reuse and resource recovery if we don't discuss with the market, if we don't discuss with our clients. And it's something that the people who are the more specialist people who are using water and reuse water, which is part of the resource recovery, if you don't explain what is reuse, if you don't go on a fit for purpose which can be explained, we are going to fail because people are going to be afraid of it. So we need to be much closer than the end user. We need to do that kind of explanation, and it's key. And if we forget that, we will lose the battle. So it's really important, and IWA has a responsibility. We need to help citizens and cities to come inside and to discuss with them. And of course, join force to establish that economy, that way, and that it is very important. We need the broad, but we need to include more economy and more people understanding how the price, how the cost, how we can introduce that, because otherwise we are going to keep fighting, but with solutions, but not being able to implement. And I do believe that IWA is really an association which can bring all the various actors. We need to put all, and it's probably one very interesting fact in IWA is to bring people from different origins, from legal regulators, from marketing and business, from industry, but for public or private utilities and for research. So it's the core value of IWA is that diversity, and it's probably where we can really bring more and where we have. That is very important, and it's where such event, Congress or our big events are there for. So I thank you very much for you being there. It's a key point for IWA to have all that possibility to exchange. Of course, I hope you will exchange and also participate to other congress, because we need to develop and not just here, and some people are not here because they couldn't come. So I welcome, and I welcome you also next year in Copenhagen. I'm sure it will be also a topic for Copenhagen, and not so far from here. So we hope to see you all in Copenhagen next year, 2020, and in other part of the world, because there are other congress of IWA, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diane, for this presentation about the importance of bringing together all the stakeholders involved in value chain. Well, actually, if we consider the last circular economy package of the European Commission, we can see that it is pretty much on waste. There is water, yes, for water reuse, but water is still underestimated. This is our thought as a scientist. And actually, one of the reasons for this was that technologies and solutions, so that means value chain, market, social, was not mature enough to be considered. That's probably one of the reasons why the European Commission has invested hundreds of millions to fund innovation projects that are scaling up, are demonstrating that these solutions are there, and maybe the next circular economy package can better consider what we can recover and reduce from waste. So with this introduction, it's my great pleasure to introduce Evdokia Kileos from the European Commission, EASME, that is going to present us resource recovery in EU-funded projects. Thank you, Evi.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here with you today. And I would like to start by congratulating the chairs, Professor Fadone and Professor Picard, for organizing and all the people that have worked for this, and also the sponsors that helped with this event. So the IWA conference is focusing on re-envisioning the role of water within circular economy and moving towards sustainability through the recovery of resources. This is very much in line with European policy and the funding for research and innovation, and I would like to briefly address this today. Very quickly to tell you where I come from EASME. It's an executive agency of the European Commission. We manage funding programs like the Horizon Program for Research and Innovation, Maritime Fisheries Fund, COSME, LIFE programs. So our objective is to contribute to a more competitive and resource-efficient European economy through knowledge and innovation. Our daily business is dealing with the program management and following the project cycle, from the proposals, granting, monitoring the projects, and dissemination and exploitation. Now, dissemination and exploitation is very important for us, and this is why I'm very happy to see one of the projects, Smart Plant, being one of the key organizers of this event. So I would like to congratulate you for this. So, as I say, resource recovery is important for European policy. This was stressed in the circular economy packages. First one that came in 2015 and the second one in 2016. 2017. These were legislative packages that they put forward actions. The objective was to maintain the value of products, materials, resources for as long as possible in the economy, and at the same time to minimize waste. There were 4 key areas: production, consumption, waste management, and secondary raw materials, and several priority sectors. Okay, maybe water was not one of them, but there are sectors related to what we're addressing in this conference. For example, critical raw materials and biomass, bio-based products. At the same time, there was some actions supporting in this circular economy to promote water reuse at European level. So we had in 2018 a proposal by the European Commission for a regulation for minimum requirements for water reuse in agriculture. We also have some work done for water reuse in industry. This is also integrated into the BREFs, the relative legislation. And a guidance is now under preparation for water reuse for aquifer recharge. Also very important in line with circular economy is the new fertilizer products regulation that was published this summer. And this is expected to facilitate the market entry of secondary raw materials, recovered circular products. Now, circular economy is very much in line with sustainable development goals. The European Union is committed to supporting them, and in particular to goals for water for all, responsible production and consumption, and climate. Now, to make circular economy reality, we need research and innovation, and research and innovation is a big part of the action plan. Horizon 2020 is the key means for research and innovation funding. And Horizon 2020 is supporting real change on the ground. And what it means for circular economy is addressing systemic eco-innovation, that is innovation that goes across sectors, and also combining different forms of innovation, going beyond the waste and recognizing the dependencies between the different value chains. Horizon 2020 supports large-scale demonstration projects, and I will speak more about this later on. And what the big difference was with this program is that it focused on impact. So it focused a lot on the environmental, economic, and social impact of the projects that it funded. Now, Horizon 2020 was the biggest funding program so far with 80 billion, but the next one, Horizon Europe, is expected to be even larger. And it promised breakthroughs. It promised to take things from the laboratory to the market, to create the environment for innovation and for investments. I will only speak about a very small part of Horizon 2020. This is the societal challenge on environment and climate that relates mostly to this, to the theme of today. We started out in 2014 with funding dedicated to specific areas. This included waste and water, and the funding increased in the 2016-17, and even was higher in 2018 till 2020. Where the interest shifted to a more systemic approach to innovation, and with the objective to transform the linear economic models to circular ones. So it's worth noting that within this part of Horizon, we have at least 65 large water projects funded up until 2018, with a total funding of almost 400 million. So now something more about the projects in relation to resource recovery. At least 19 of them, of these projects, focus on resource recovery. This is a funding of 126 million. I should note that about half of the funding goes to private organizations, and almost 1/3 goes to small and medium enterprises. Now, these are big projects and that have, on average, 20 partners each. It is important to note, and it has been said already, that the participants come from all over the value chain. It is not just the water researchers or the technology providers that participate in these projects. They bring together specialists from different fields, including sustainability, economies, communication, digitalization, but they also bring together actors from the industries, from the SMEs. They bring together regional authorities or municipalities in some projects, and in several projects we see water utilities. Also, they involve either directly in the consortia or as stakeholders, the end users. So we have farmers associations or homeowners associations. And the objective is to have all of them work together in a co-creation mode. Moreover, these projects are innovation actions. What this means is that in terms of technology, it will be of the outputs of the project are almost market ready, high TRL, or if they're developing solutions of services, these are tested in real scale. And the goal is to create opportunities to exploit the outputs of these projects in order to address the water challenges, but also the challenges that come from the dependencies from water and the other sectors. So in these 19 projects, we have at least 86 large demonstrations, most of them in Europe, but also we have demonstrations in other countries of the world, which are either big pilots or market replications of innovative solutions. In these demonstrations, they combine novel technologies, but also business models and governance to support to close the water cycle and to address the dependencies with the other value chains. The objective of the demonstrations is to prove the sustainability of the solutions in order to make them, to enable them to be exploited in the future. So they address resource recovery from different aspects in relation to water reuse, in relation to energy efficiency and production, nutrients, and materials. Most of the projects are addressing more than one aspect. Many projects address all these aspects together. They promote new technologies for wastewater treatment, for example, and demonstrate the reuse of the water in agriculture or industry or recharge. They produce energy with cogeneration, producing biogas, biofuels. We have several projects that recover nutrients with novel technologies, and many projects that recover other materials, biomass, minerals, cellulose, or they produce other products such as biopolymers, as was mentioned before. So in doing so, not only do they recover the secondary raw materials, but they also contribute to reducing pollution of the rivers and the ocean, and they also reduce CO2 emissions. As was already mentioned, digitalization is an important component of our projects. And it's necessary to sometimes in order for the projects to realize the objectives. We have a cluster of projects in the EU, EU-funded projects, ICT for Water, and there was an analysis done in relation to the water cycle, value chain, and digitalization. A report will come out in the fall regarding this, but it's worth mentioning that recovery of resources was identified to be both in the primary activities and the secondary activities of most of these projects in terms of operation of resources, water reuse, in water treatment, material recovery, energy recovery, and sludge management. Now, this was about the projects funded until 2018. We're now evaluating the 2019 projects and also providing information for work program 2020. There are several topics under the next work program that relate to water. I'm only mentioning here a few of them that are relevant to this theme. We have a topic on climate, water, energy food nexus for 13 million. And there's some SPIRE topics that are relevant. The three of them together are 97 million. Two of the topics are not dedicated to water, but water can play a big role there, such as for the topic of industrial symbiosis or alternative mineral resources. But there is one topic that is dedicated to water in terms of recycling from industrial waters. We will have an information day on 16th, 17th of September, and if you're interested, I invite you to attend. You don't have to be in Brussels. It will be web streamed, so you can log in and attend, and you can ask your questions online, and the material will be available afterwards as well if you want to ask questions after. Now, it's not just the Horizon program, but other programs that are very relevant. I will briefly mention also LIFE program, that it has been around since '92. LIFE program has an environment strand and a climate strand. The environment focuses on resource efficiency and nature and biodiversity. In relation to water, the LIFE program addresses freshwater, floods, droughts, but also marine and coastal management and the water industry. So since 2014, there were 69 projects funded under LIFE program with 75 million. Now these projects are smaller, but still they make significant contributions to the same objectives. Here there is an analysis of the areas covered by LIFE water projects, and you can see that a big part of them contributes to resource recovery. The majority of them address wastewater treatment, but within their focus was the recovery of resources, water reuse, energy efficiency, and energy production. And just to mention a few examples here, 3 projects, one in relation to water supply, Project Dreamer, improves desalination processes and increasing water recovery. Another project in relation to the industry, reduce pollution from metal industry and at the same time recovers chemicals. And another project, Ramses, in relation to wastewater treatment, it improves the quality of treated water and demonstrates its reuse in agriculture. Now, beyond the funding and the programs, there have been many initiatives and communities that have developed over the years as a result of EU funding and related to this area, and all of them have events in the upcoming months. So stay connected and follow these initiatives, involve yourselves in these communities. Throughout this conference, I think you will have an opportunity to hear in more detail about the Horizon projects in the dedicated sessions, in the post-conference event, and in the poster exhibition, to find out more details and the technical information that you're probably more interested to. So I want to wish you to enjoy this conference and to have constructive discussions. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Evdokia, for this presentation. Actually, as you mentioned, we will have a post-conference workshop because when we are preparing Horizon proposals, we are asking utilities, do you want to join? And they ask us, why should I join? Well, now it's time to see why they joined and to have their comments to improve our possibilities to work better together. So we'll have a post-conference workshop. It was co-organized by Project and by ASME to show that we are working together. Well, to close this opening session before our scientific plenary session, I would like to ask if there are questions from the audience for our speakers. concerning global vision, European vision, and national vision and issues also that were presented.
Thank you very much. Since nobody asked questions, it's more, it is a question, but with an inherent comment. Obvious by missing any discussion today by the esteemed presenters of direct potable reuse. Was it me, or was it that I missed it all completely, that nobody mentioned that as an option in part of the circular concept of water?
Who is willing to reply to this very interesting question? I can reply from an innovation point of view. There are projects ongoing that are evaluating the direct potable reuse. The barrier is for sure legislation barrier, regulatory barrier. So if we consider, for example, material recovery, we are progressing. We will talk about phosphorus, and in Italy the legislation is going to promote phosphorus recovery. Some other countries are obliging phosphorus recovery. For water use, we just have the new regulation on wastewater use for agriculture and industry, but for the direct potable use in many countries, this is just not allowed. So innovation projects are ongoing, but legislation barrier is a real barrier that is addressed from a scientific point of view at the moment. So this is what an innovator can say, of course.
Thank you for the question, which is challenging. Yeah, I think nobody discussed about direct, because in fact we didn't discuss about how you use phosphorus when you use it, and so it's more the way you reuse, which can be a discussion, and direct reuse is a discussion. Do you need direct, or can you do indirect, or do you do? So that's discussion of the reuse. In fact, is how do you reuse, and all the discussion about fit for purpose are probably the reality and the difficulty. I did not stress in my speech, but I will take the opportunity you ask the question to stress something. One also of the importance is when you start to reuse, or when you start to try to reduce, I think starting to reduce your consumption is also very important. So when you start that circular economy, you also start the reflection of do we need so much water? Do we need less water? What kind of water do we really need? And how do we share that water? So the big challenge, and of course, is for water. We now have lots of discussion in the water reuse, I would say specialist group or conferences. What does it mean? What is fit for purpose? European legislation has been working on that, and there can be a difference sometime between their vision and other part of the world, because it depends also of do you really need direct reuse, for example, in Europe. What was interesting, and I would like to stress, I'm not the main specialist on the European water reuse discussion, but I was really interested by a reflection, because of course in Europe you have different countries, and all the need for reuse of water is not exactly the same, being in South Spain or in Spain, or being in Norway, for example. You could have some differences. So when you started to say, well, we are going to do a regulation on reuse, you had to put all those different sensitivity together and try to make a common law, which is complex. But one reason where the European Commission was able to succeed was interesting, because if they didn't manage to have a common vision on why do you need reuse and for what purpose, then you could have a different vision, and you could have people who said, well, you reuse the water for agriculture in Spain, so we are going to forbid the French people don't want to eat cucumber which have been receiving reuse of water. So if Europe was not able to have a common vision, you could have started to put barrier to products, which is a risk. So the necessity to find an equilibrium between all that push sometime maybe the regulator to be very cautious. But it's also a way to say, well, do we really need reuse for that purpose, or how do we manage it? And it was very interesting to see how Europe was coming to find a compromise, I would say, in order to have the same vision. So I think, yes, discussion about direct reuse on are still very important, but it's more the, I would say, the technical aspect or the legal aspect or the sensitivity aspect which has to be discussed. And the real, in my opinion, the real good discussion is what is a fit for purpose. And in the reuse and resource recovery, you will have exactly the same kind of discussion about ammonia reuse, or if you reuse for agriculture, what is the necessity, what kind. It's probably different if you are on forest, or if you are on cucumber, or if you are, so you will have to work on that too. Yeah. So maybe a bit far away from your question, but I took the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. Any other question from the audience? Oh. I would like to thank again the speaker of this opening session. Thank you again. Now we change panel, and Ilya is going to chair this session of plenary speakers.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, the conference officially opened, so now the scientific program. But before we start, I have to make something clear, because Francesco didn't mention my name. He said friend and competitor. Yeah. For the record, because everything is recorded, I let him win, okay? So I live in Australia, I work in Australia, we're here, so that means he wanted to tell you guys I beat Ilya, but no, I let him win. No, it's not true. He played kind of dirty. It was about the topic, the scientific program, and the location. He said the topic is resource recovery from water. He did not even talk about the scientific program. He just showed 50 slides of Venice. And finished with the words, registration will be 25% cheaper than Australia. So that was 2 years ago, and yet here we are. So thanks for that, Francesco. All right. It's time to be inspired. So we had quite a few discussions over Skype, Francesco and me, who to invite as a plenary speaker, and then we decided, no, we have to invite two people, namely Mark van Loosdrecht and Willy Verstraeten. And one of the key reasons was that when you start your PhD, it's often like 90% of the PhD students, including myself, including Francesco, you start your PhD and think, I'm going to develop a new technology. Yeah, you're very enthusiastic. And then 3 years later, you realize that it's not that easy. Yeah? So it's not that easy, but it can be done. And it has been done, and by Mark and Willy a couple of times in their career. So what they're going to talk about in the coming half an hour for each of the presentations, they're going to talk about the past. So what they have achieved in the past, the successes, the lessons learned. So maybe they're going to talk about the failures too, what they're currently working on, because Mark stepped down as editor-in-chief and Willy is retired, so actually they even have more time than before. And then they're going to finish with their vision for 2050 and beyond. So how is it going to look like? I hope that within their vision, resource recovery is going to play an important role. And I'm pretty sure it will. But without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mark van Loosdrecht.
Thank you. Yep. No, back. Good. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to spend half an hour in front of this room and come to this very nice city. It's even turned sunny at the moment. Well, you're all inside after a day of rain. As Ilya said, he asked us to talk about past, present, and future. And I will try to do so, and that in the context of resource recovery, of course. When preparing these slides, I got this week a remark that it's not good to show private pictures. So I thought I'd better start with some private pictures. And for some good reasons. I'm not sure who of you know Zanskar. It's a small region in the north of India. And it's a kind of peculiar region because it's completely surrounded by mountains of 7,000 meters high, mountain passes of over 4,000 meters. And the only way you can reach that area, that community, is either pass in summer. 2 or 3 months it's open, the rest of the year it's full of snow and you cannot pass. Or in here the mountain pass, or in winter, the river, which you see here disappearing in a canyon. You can walk a few days across a frozen river to reach that community. It's a Buddhist community. That means that it's documented that for around 2,000 years, this community has been there, has been stable, without any input or export, significant inputs or exports of, say, food, products, nutrients, and whatever. So this community has managed to maintain itself for about at least 2,000 years as a stable community. It's not actually lacking water in that valley. It's lacking energy to pump up the water, because as soon it's all steep, so as soon as you can do that, it's green. But essentially the rest, it's a kind of desert-like high altitude place. And one of the essential part of all the houses is that the toilet is always on the first floor, and below is an area, a chamber for collecting the feces, which once a year can be harvested. Get the signals right. Can be harvested through this door and used on the fields. In this way they manage the nutrients effectively by being large part vegetarian. They also don't need that much. And the second part of sustainable development is a stable population growth, and that they managed by granting a significant part of the population the possibility to stay in monasteries and prevent that the population becomes too big. But this society shows, this is lessons from the past, that it is possible to get a very sustainable society, and as an example. And that's also from other societies in the past. As soon as there's enough pressure, sustainability automatically will increase, because then things get valuable and it gets a chance to work on it. That's what you saw, especially before the chemical industry with the Haber-Bosch process came up. There were a lot of initiatives in Europe, commercial initiatives, which were economically viable. A factory for phosphate recovery from the wastewater in Prague, which the building is still there. Examples from Netherlands, where a commercial company operated to collect feces, etc., to sell the nutrients in agriculture. And of course, all these initiatives were killed by the fact that Haber-Bosch invented the ammonia production process and by the availability of chemical, at least of mined phosphate. And being here in Italy, maybe it's good to remember that the phrase pecunia non olet was a tax raised in the Roman Empire on urine in order to raise, of course, tax for the government, but it also indicates that also in that time, recovery of nutrients or recovery of urine was an economic viable activity which was taxated instead of subsidized to get it running. And also in recent days, as long as things has value, that's collecting food waste as animal feed up to the 60s, 70s, until soy, etc., became available and was cheaper than collecting the food waste. And still, for metals, there's a big market which is hardly regulated, but more or less all metals are quite efficiently recovered because the value is high enough. Lessons here from the past is as long as resources are really limiting, society will manage to find a way to create the value to recover them. And that's probably also the easiest way to do that. Human society can be resource efficient if there is a clear economic or societal drive. But there's also things which prevent that if that drive is not strong enough, and that is the inherent want to minimize risk and optimize safety. And risk minimization is probably one of the main limitations. And that's maybe something for society as a whole to really discuss. Where do we want to take risk? And probably that's again related to how much limiting is the water. The water potable reuse is a nice example. As soon as there's really no water, people will use it, like in the spaceships, etc., where people drink each other's urine because there is nothing else and they have no problem with it. And of course, the aspects of economy and comfort. To the present, why do we want a circular economy? That's essentially driven again by the note that with the strong increase in population, resources get so limited that we have to reuse them or recover them in whatever way. And I think the Ellen MacArthur picture is the most used one. And part of that is recovery and reuse, and part of that is the bio-based economy, where you convert the organic material, trying to upgrade it again and reuse in different forms. And just took one of the pictures which is used in the context of water. There's different flows of water which can be treated separate, together, and delivering water, energy, and nutrients. And still, for most of you, that's maybe trivial, but still in most of the diagrams, the chemicals are missing. And on the long run, I think that's the only one which can make this cycle running in an economic way, unless we lose the Haber-Bosch process at a certain moment. How do you get to new processes? That was one of the questions from Ilya. How do you do that? And in my view, the only way to do that is by creating a little bit of chaos, creativity, curiosity-driven research. That's the only way to really get somewhere else. It's nicely illustrated by the cartoon of Theodor Hansch. If you're not curiosity-driven, but if you're goal-driven and you set legislation, you set guidelines, you bounce against this legislation and guidelines because you set your boundary, your box where you stay in. And the only way to get new things is getting out of that box, and that's by stimulating curiosity-driven research. And I will illustrate that on some of the projects where we have been working on in Delft over the years. But that cycle, and that's also the role of universities, do curiosity-driven research, provide knowledge, and combine that with known problems from practice by interaction with people in practice, utilities, companies. And that total system will lead to innovation. As an example, the biopolymers, PHA, I will not spend too much words because there's so many presentations in the meantime in these meetings that I can keep it short, but the original attention for it was raised by the fact that early 80s, early 90s was a lot of attention for modeling. And what we notice is that the yield coefficient used in these activated sludge models is totally different from the yield coefficients which you measure in a microbiological sense. One is around 0.67, is used in ASM1, and 0.5 is the real one. So there was a misconcept, we started to figure it out. So these are the fact that bacteria not only grow, but produce storage polymers that led, among others, to ASM number 3, but also the realization that these storage polymers were also tried to be produced in the industry as a bioplastic, as an alternative plastic. And so that set things going. And without too much further, one of the main aspects at the moment is for PHA. There are technologies, you will see them at the conference, but there's not a unique selling point for PHA besides that's biodegradable, but there are other biodegradable polymers, so it's still needed to find that. And that needs creativity, that needs probably also marketing, and maybe in a different way than just pure on the technical properties, but also on a kind of story around it, feel good. And that's why I like one of the initiatives of the Dutch water boards. They give a designer the task, do something with PHA, and this designer came up with, well, we can nicely blend it with the ashes after recremation and create a kind of structure as a memory of the lost person. And That's a very different way of thinking of using materials, not on its biodegradability or what else, but thinking about circular economy, thinking about reuse and the cycle of life. Another heavily studied one is phosphate, struvite. And in general, if I look to the whole struvite research and work on it, it's focused on phosphate recovery, it's focused on struvite. That's what you read in the literature. If you look to mass balances of treatment plants, you can actually only recover struvite if you also do biological phosphate removal, which I like, so it's a very good combination. But in the end, you will recover about 15% of the load to the treatment plant. So if you're really interested in recovering phosphate, you should not go for struvite. You should find other ways to recover 100% of the phosphate. If you recover struvite, you save management, you save maintenance issues on the plant. That's why quite a lot of the water boards are implementing it. And at the same time, it's a very good way to communicate with the customers about what a water board is doing, or a wastewater utility is doing. So also a positive aspect and also reason to do it. It's not a negative argumentation. However, we got the chance to just freely go into phosphate mineralogy in the sludge due to collaboration with WETSIS. And there were a few aspects which were there important for setting this research. I was thinking, well, everyone claims that chemical phosphate removal has no reuse potential because iron phosphates are so strongly bound that they're not available. Yet, all the lakes where you add iron to bind the phosphate, there's a big back delivery of phosphate, so there must be a remobilization of phosphate from iron going on. If you can use that, then you can also potentially recover phosphate in chemical phosphate removal systems. Moreover, if you read the literature, some people have tried to make mass balances of iron over the aeration basin of a treatment plant, and they always saw it doesn't work. And the reason that it didn't work, these mass balances, was the assumption that phosphate is in the oxidized state in an aeration basin. When we started to look in it, it turned out that also in the aeration basin, a significant fraction of the phosphate is in the order of reduced iron mineral called vivinite. And when we looked in the digesters, depending on the iron to phosphate ratio, but if you have an iron to phosphate ratio of around 1.5, then more or less all the phosphate is bound in one mineral, vivinite. And that's maybe an easier mineral to recover than struvite. Now, vivinite is actually very well known in wastewater treatment plants, because if you Google on scaling and wastewater treatment plants, you almost only find vivinite as the scaling compound, not struvite. And here you see an example of a vivinite scaling from a pipe at the treatment plant of Venlo, which is really showing it can be massive scalings. And vivinite is among one thing known as one of the famous Delft painters, Vermeer. The blue he used was vivinite. It was reduced vivinite, and after all these centuries, the blue is still blue, because vivinite has a very slow oxidation rate. So that gives the idea, well, let's see if we can recover it. And vivinite has an interesting characteristic because it's magnetic. And magnetic separation is very well known in the mining. So we went to company Autotech and got a pilot facility, which more or less is the mining machine itself. And using that, we immediately could recover vivinite in a reasonable way. And there's now work on a scheme where we just have chemical iron removal, magnetic separation. Then either the vivinite is directly used, because iron phosphate is used as fertilizer in some aspects of agriculture, or you can dissolve it at high pH, make again iron hydroxide, bring the iron hydroxide back in the plant, cycle it there, and bring the phosphate product, potassium phosphate or something, as a fertilizer out. So it's a different scheme, but it would allow roughly maybe 80% of the total phosphate load recovered at the treatment plant at the same time, because you remove a significant fraction of the ash of the waste sludge, you reduce the sludge content of the system. Now, if you're interested in that, there's Thomas and Wokke hanging around at the conference here, and they will gladly talk to you about the project they are running It's poster 55, but there are 2 posters more which I forgot to note the number, but I'm sure they will be enthusiastic to talk to you. Third polymer, it was where we're working on. It's also somehow curiosity driven because EPS is still stand for extracellular polymeric substances, and that already indicates we don't know what it is. It's just substances, it's a slime layer. There are measurement methods, but you can read this paper, all these methods, they give a number, but these numbers actually should be forgotten because they are not really representative. It seems you are quantitative, but they are not. I'm not going into detail in this presentation, but part of the problem with EPS research, and that's as a biofilm person, an important part of the biofilm is that its extraction methods used in literature are not good. The chemical analysis, the methods which are used are the most heavily cited papers in the scientific literature. But in these papers, it's already mentioned why you should not use them. For the current use, they are, but still they are used. And the sugar polymers are not easy to analyze. And that's mainly because sugars are way more complicated than DNA. DNA, if you have 4 units of monomers, you have about 4,000 different options of these 4 units to get a chain, but with sugars you have already 10 to the 13th different options for getting a 4 sugar monomer. So the analysis is orders of magnitude more complicated. That's why the system was stalled, and it was difficult in the past to get money actually to get it financing for EPS research. But recently, together with a few people at the lab, we started to get money to run and to look into it. And then it turns out that the composition of this material is indeed not simple sugars or simple proteins. But you find amyloid-like glycosylated proteins, sialic acids as a part, sulfated proteoglycan structures, polymers which are very close actually to the tissue of mammals and not the simple polymers as is thought, which look more like starch or gelatin. That EPS as a resource is, in my view, an interesting one, and that's mainly because it's a large fraction of what's called waste sludge. System where we are looking at granular sludge is about 30% of the total organic mass is extracellular polymers. The polymers which you produce, the extracellular polymers, you cannot make out of oil. If you have PHA, it's also polymer, but you compete effectively with oil-based chemistry, polypropylene, polyethylene. The polymers, the extracellular polymers, the competition is all bio-based. That's gelatin, that's alginate, that's carrageenan. And their market sizes are in the same size as, even smaller than what you would recover from a wastewater treatment plant. So you're dealing in a very different environment than when you deal with PHA relative to the extracellular polymers. And this biopolymer market is supply limited. Nobody cultivates cows in order to produce gelatin. Gelatin is a byproduct from the meat production and not the other way around. So most of these biopolymers, they cannot be, they're just supply limited. That's why the prices are high, and you are in a market where you come with a potential valuable compound. Of course, if you start to produce more polymers, the market price will go down. But what we saw, we can make many new materials, and where we specifically look at is the granular sludge, Nereda plants, and that polymer is now denoted as Chimera, to have a name for it. It comes from our research on granular sludge, and after Nereda technology was developed, we of course wondered what are the bacteria now doing to make these granules. We knew pretty well as engineers how to do it. We want to know how bacteria do it, and we start looking into that. And that research now led to the first demo site, which will be opened next month. It's a facility of roughly 400 tons of EPS under the name Chimera, and I will tell a little bit about its capacity. One of the first things we saw that we can use these polymers to make nacre. And nacre is the material from the shells of crabs and shrimps. And that material has specific material properties which has not been able to reproduce despite large efforts by standard chemical polymers, which are all oil-based. So we can make this nacre-like material from shells just using clay, and the polymer from the activated sludge or alginate works the same. And one of the first applications has been on using that as a coating for cement, for a construction industry. You can put it at coating that prevents the water evaporation. So the original idea was we can prevent using water in the construction industry, but it turned out that not only we needed less water, but also the crystallization of the carbonates in the beton, in the concrete, was much better, meaning that the material had an added value, not just saving water, but saving the amount of concrete you need in order to get a dense layer which protects the steel inside the concrete. So this product is now on the market with alginate as the compound, because several biopolymers work in the same way, although it was not really seen before. But as soon as there's sufficient Chimera, it will be replaced by Chimera. One of the most intriguing factors is that we can make this material, and it's almost fire resistant. You see the white side on the back side and the heavy red on the front side. This material is fire resistant. It's up to 1,000 degrees, it doesn't flame. And up to about 180 degrees, it keeps its strength. And that's a material property which is not available in the chemical industry. So we now can make out of the sludge from a treatment plant with maybe some clay or some cellulose, a material which is in the end not burnable, which is not directly what you think about for biopolymers, but at the same time, if you know that wool is not burnable, then you know that it's not that strange that some biopolymers are not flammable. But this is one of the characteristics where we will look at as a unique selling point, and you, Mylin, will tomorrow in session 3 present especially this non-flammable aspects of Chimera. We can make many more materials from it. We can blend it with cellulose. We get a mother of pearl effect. That round white shell here is Chimera with recovered toilet paper, and this is of course an oyster shell. This is the same material. The color here is due to light refraction. We can add the colors. It's exactly the same way as butterflies have their colors. They are not based on stains. They are based on mineral type and light reflection, and that's what can be used here. And completely on the right-hand side, an example of a kimono where the Chimera has been used as binder for the dyes, and the dyes are the red one, Anamox EPS, and the blue one, Vivianite. And also here, this is Vivianite stain, and this is Anamox stain. So we can make very nice materials out of what is called waste. And if we talk about consumer perception and consumer acceptance, people reflect very different to this kind of, say, reused materials than when you tell them this glass is reused wastewater. This is reused toilet water as well, but it has some appeal, and that also shows that it's not by definition negative and dirty what you make. To round up, as asked, a bit about the future. Well, I think the basic urban water structure, as it is in the last 5,000 years, will be there also in the future. I don't think that we are that innovative as all these people who lived on Earth 5,000 years before us, when the basic urban water structure was invented. We would really be brilliant to do that. Also, the Cloaca Maxima will still be used in Rome, I'm sure, in 2050. Structure which has survived 2,000 years, also now showing that things can be very sustainable. And once you build it, and you build them well, you can use it also a long time. And that's maybe better than having every 10 years a new, or even every 2 or 3 years a new mobile phone. What will happen is a better integration, because we need resource recovery. And actually the resource, I did not see any paper on that in this conference, but the real resource in wastewater is, besides water, by the way, is heat. And I don't think I saw a paper, but I might have overlooked that. But for me, that's the most important. The integration of water system and the whole heat and climate control of a city. And there is much more valuable than, for instance, the biogas. It takes a bit more effort, but and it's less interesting if you're a bioengineer, but it's probably more important. Energy, I don't think wastewater treatment plants will be energy producers, but what is very important, if you can be autarkic as treatment plant, and that will probably happen, because if you could just not get rid of the electricity, but just of the power line to your plant, you save a lot of money. So if you can design your plant without relying on the grid, either for delivering or buying electricity, you're much more cheaper, you save a lot of money, and that is possible, and that's an economic driver, so that will somehow develop. Some products will be produced anyway because it's possible and it doesn't really require money or a lot of money, like phosphate and cellulose. And I think some products, I think mainly the EPS-based products, will be produced on an economic basis. And for that last, there is a need for a kind of value chain development, which is quite complicated, because you want to link the wastewater industry or the waste industry with the chemical industry. And the chemical industry operates very different. They have one big resource, the oil well or the coal plant, and that goes to a very big centralized unit, one for all of Europe, and that ends up in consumer products which are distributed. Here it's different. Only in the Netherlands you would already have 300 sites where the product is produced. You have to get it, blend it, bring it as a raw material on the market, then turn it into the chemical industry. We pretty well know how to make consumer goods out of it. And not only the logistics need to be very different from a chemical market, but also now you certainly start somewhere in the public atmosphere, and there's somewhere a transition from public to private, and that's not an easy transition, because that leads to a lot of politics. And that's not straightforward, because who owns your shit is a kind of interesting thing once you can make money with it. The pecunia non olet from the Romans. So overall, I think resource recovery, that we can make it happen. What's needed is really not so much, well, partly, of course, once you know what you do, then you have to be very goal-oriented, but we're not in the stage here with resource recovery that we can say we know what we have to do. So there's a lot of need for just creative research, which is not set out by regulators and others who think how things should work. And also regulators should prevent that they set up rules which then later on prevent development, because also that is regularly seen. And then you'll find many new options, and I want to thank all the collaborators from the group in Delft and you for being listening to my talk.
Thank you very much. Great talk, and we have time for 1 or 2 questions before we go to Willy. Anybody? Well, you got a second chance after the presentation of Willy. Then you can ask more questions. So thanks again, Mark. All right, next presentation. Please welcome Willy Verstraeten.
Thank you very much, Ilya. Ladies and gentlemen, a real pleasure, I must say, to be here at this 3rd conference. I like to introduce my co-author, Silvio Matassa. He is here. Carlos Zamaloa is also here, if he has arrived in time. Yves de Petter is not here, but he was also very enthusiastically thinking along. And the sponsors of the whole line you see here. Let us start. I was indeed, just as Mark, obliged to speak about the past, the present, and the future. So let's start with the past, and I call it the track record in resource recovery. As you may know, I date from Jurassic Park times. In the 70s, ladies and gentlemen, one of the first challenges that I got was, what can we recover from piggery manure? So I got a brilliant idea, and I said, let's turn it immediately to animal feed. ladies and gentlemen, it worked. It was a very good and excellent conversion, but it flopped completely, and I'll tell you later why. It was a lesson that I have never forgotten in the rest of my career. In 1975, there was the energy crisis, the first, and we turned to biogas, manure to biogas. This has been growing. We built the first plant in Belgium. And this has been numbering more and more numbers on that. And then in the 80s, we turned to biogas from municipal solid waste. Everybody declared us crazy. This was not possible. And now, of course, there are hundreds of installations all over the world. In 2000, we had a small drinking water company near the Belgian coast, which by some kind of political reasons was locked off from water supply. And they got very inspired and said, can we not fully recycle? There was something in Africa somewhere, a name that worked like that. But we were not afraid of trying something, and I'll show you the slide in a minute. In Oost-Duinkerke, near the Belgian coast, there is full recycling of wastewater. And it works, and it still works, and I see Glenn here. You visited with us. It's a true story, and we are very proud of it, and it works. 2003, we got friends from aquaculture, and they said, oi, we get in real trouble. This becomes far too messy. We have this fish shits in the water. We should do something. And then we talked, and I'll give a slide in a minute, on the biofloc technology. And ever since, if you are in aquaculture, it works. And this is direct fishes to fish, to feed. And then some of you might know, in 2011, we thought, well, after a visit to China, actually, and talking with Professor Kang Yi, she said, all this destruction of nitrogen, is there nothing better to do? And this got us inspired, and we started to work on mineral nitrogen and carbon capturing in the form of an old story, which is single-cell biomass. Let's have a little bit more detail. The piggery story. The piggery story, 8% dry matter, you centrifuge, you have the fibers, you do aeration, and then you do a kind of acidification. When you acidify, you get a proteinaceous coagulate. It's stable, it's hygienic. We got our veterinary faculty. We had 3 generations of sheep eating this, 3 generations of sheep eating the transformed feces of pigs. Everything was perfect. Everything was technically okay, but here is the answer. We got a journalist outside our knowledge who came there, and he wrote for a tabloid type of system. He made a horror story out of it, and that was the end. First lesson for today. Be afraid and be aware that some things can be completely ruined by a mispresentation of things. The past, we started to work on organic waste systems, on actually solid waste composting. In those days, it was thought that this would never work. Now, that became a spin-off company, the Dranko process. And here is a latest plant in France, a plant which takes 60,000 tons of mixed waste. You see, this works, this is clean, this is efficient. Everybody is proud about it. I never had dared to dream that this could develop that way. The story on the drinking water. Here is an 80,000, not too big, but 80,000 inhabitant equivalent drinking water system, wastewater system, excuse me. The water comes out, and we wanted to recirculate it. So we went through membrane filtration, reverse osmosis. There was even at a given moment some UV around. But then we had learned our lesson, and we started to talk to everybody that we could find who wanted to talk. And we needed a heck of a lot of public relation work. And it came out that there was no way that they would even accept this if we didn't went to some kind of an infiltration. Now, We did then a lot of hazard assessment, critical control points, and this infiltration, and there is now a little park around this, and people can visit this. The reality is that this water is very clean. Here there are a lot of seagulls shitting on it, and it becomes much more dirty than it was here, but the people like it. If you are for 1 month at the Belgian coast, I guarantee you, you drink what you discharge the first day. It works. It exists, everybody comes to look at it, and there are no issues. But this was crucial in the beginning. The aquaculture story. Aquaculture people think that this is clean. It's a horrible story. You have protein-rich material, often coming from the high sea. Only 20% comes in the first run in the direction of the fish. 80% is immediately in the water, and you have to do a heck of a lot of a job, and you cannot really take out all the water. So we use then a concept which comes from the soil, and that is called priming. If you add a carbohydrate to this water while the fish are swimming in it, the microbes are ahead of the fish, and they really take this waste nitrogen and phosphorus, make microbial, let's call it here, biomass, single-cell protein, and this technique, this aeration, and just adding the right amount of carbohydrate, which then converts all the shit of the fish to microbial protein, which is then grazed by the same species or by another species, that is called biofloc technology. And from 20 you go to 45. There was a lot of hesitation in the beginning, but the whole industry now accepts it. This is called biofloc technology. It's actually nothing else than in situ turning the fish shit into fish again. Normally you have this efficiency, you are here, and also studies with N15 definitely show that you double really your nitrogen efficiency. This is the truth, and this is the reality, and it is accepted. We can come to acceptance if we prepare it properly. And then the last story, dating from 2015 with Silvio Matassa in the story, was can direct conversion of used nitrogen to new feed and protein help to feed the world? That's a decent question to ask. So this paper then got gradually growing, and since then we have continued that line of work. We are not there yet, but I will talk a little bit further about it. So in terms of the past, our track record in resource recovery has a lot of variety in it, and I like to stress that communication to and acceptance by the public is of crucial importance. As a youngster, I didn't look into that enough, and I learned it the hard way. This brings me to the presence. Okay, the presence, the cyclic economy. Let's start to wonder a little bit where we are and what are the potentialities. When you look into what is called resource management in consumer, in terms of what the consumer likes and how it could work, we should have durable design, we should have enhanced repair and upgrade services, we should have product take-back systems. I don't know how it is in your countries, but it's not like as I would like to see it. The current business models do not really support these issues. Policies, for instance, which give value to waste, for instance, container deposit value, are depicted by the industry as horrible. If we put a value on it, somebody will pick it up, somebody will collect it, but the packaging industry really really lobbies politicians all over in Europe certainly, and I think the rest of the world also, that there should be no container deposits. And this increasing e-commerce and that single-piece delivery system that we now see really taking over our markets are not in the line of making or progressing very heavily in the direction of a cyclic economy, in my view. To be really convincing, recovery products should have a lower footprint than virgin material-based equivalents. But actually, the burdens of primary production are often very, very skewly presented. They are presented without externalized costs. And that means that we have a very great difficulty to compete at that level. The producers are not inclined to let it happen that these externalized costs are more and more, or should be more and more integrated in their prime production systems. If this is so, we are on a difficult spot. I'm hopeful, but I say it very clearly. Policymakers should urgently find consensus with the producers and force them to take much more the full primary production costs into their evaluation. Otherwise, we have a hard time in our cyclic economy. We all were super happy in 2015, the Paris agreements. But we know, for instance, in terms of CO2, that they are not at all respected. And why do the climate activists get such a cold shoulder when it comes to realization? My view is that resource recycling and cyclic economy must be doable and understandable for the man and the woman in the street. That means the man and the woman in the street is always worried. Yeah, we are green, yeah, but what are the costs? Is it safe and sound? We heard already some remarks on that. And actually, it comes to showing a clear and straightforward net environmental benefits despite the often complexity of the processes which are involved. The man in the street, the consumer, we must talk and talk again with that person much more to see what is happening. We see over and over again that elements like that really then bugger down this cyclic economy. I give some key features in my reasoning, just some examples. Actually, the consumer is very afraid of contaminants. When it goes to your child or your family, particularly fecal contaminants. Actually, there are also major cultural and religious barriers which we should respect. And an example is the case of new water in Singapore, which went beautifully until at a given moment a particular religious group said no. They still do new water, but it can only be done in the line of industry. Recovery from waste in general should follow paths in which the consumer has confidence. Now, I've talked to many people, and here comes my story. Actually, in medieval times, when we had something extremely bad, we burned it. Witches, yes? The problem was solved. But deep in our crocodile brain, it's unbelievable. If you say, I did this and that, people say, but if you say, I burned it, it's okay, it's clean. Burning is deep in our consciousness, some very strong cleaning process. And the same thing goes when something transforms to gas. If something becomes methane, CO2, you talk to regulators, they say, oh, it became gas. If it is in a gas phase, it's okay, no more questions. And then, of course, we all like metamorphosis. This, we all know, this is a mushroom, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is horse manure and whatever you want. And there is a centimeter between, and we never ask questions, because it has been transformed. You talk about something which is at a centimeter distance from fecal matter, and any other food product, it won't work. You get horror all over the face. So this brings me to my feature of today. The final product from waste recovery should relate to the market economy. Very much clear. There should be a real demand by the consumer. And that means that if you do something, and there is not every day somebody at your door that says, do you have more of that? There is a problem. It's as simple as that. The take home is try to combine a cleansing technology with a new outlook, the metamorphosis, and integrate recovery in a supply chain which offers several perspectives. That is something, in my view, that is very important. Let me give another element, recovery products. What we also may say, as such, that means untransformed, tend to get only some 20% of the value of virgin ones. This is my rule of thumb. Look here, this is fertilizer value, this is what it is worth in compost or in digestate, a factor at the very most 10-20%. You take this fecal matter, you pyrolyze or gasify it, and the price is suddenly much higher. Concept of transformation is very important. Other element, things rapidly become very complex. This was a paper recently published. The issue of basic water reclamation needs a sequence of 10 treatment steps. So if you go from the sewage treatment, the conventional activated sludge, to clean water, 10 steps. This is often something that we underestimate. And also, I must say, things rapidly become up to the point of a headache. If you say, okay, I will take water and I will make treated water for reuse, and you really want to do the job properly, you always end up with solids, and then you must look also at brine, crystallization, evaporation, and even a dump site. All of these make that this total recycling is very complex. We should be very aware of that. And to make it really complete, sometimes we look always this direction, but the game changer comes from a totally different direction. I was reading this paper that said, okay, we will take supermarket and household wastes, actually good wastes, we will mix them, we will then do anaerobic digestion and do a life cycle analysis, but for the sake of clarity, we also take gasification. And the winner was this. So we must keep our eyes open. We must look all directions and indeed have that element of serendipity in our research. Finishing that second part, the presence, my messages are: be aware of consumer psychology. Tricky. The law of conservation of misery. We do one thing, we take the best of that, but then we have a worse problem with the rest. The digestate in the anaerobic digesters is a real example of that. But fortunately, there is usually some serendipity in the air, and that can help us to move out, and that's something that we should really always try to find. And that brings me to the future. Upgrading to what? I have three items that I will touch on. It's all a bit magic, isn't it? But that's beautiful, that keeps us alive. I will talk a little bit about biogas, CO2, and then carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, and P resources all together. If we look at biogas, biomethane, the buzzword is integration. I was intrigued to read in a recent paper that for Germany, integration would give 3 important potentials: produce LNG and dry ice, methanol, and here comes a beautiful one, produce via then a kind of wax, a wax which we no longer seem to get from the bees. So beautiful. It's a little bit what Mark is saying. We should be looking to certain polymers that are no longer available or get in a kind of crunch for one or other reason. So that was the story about Germany. The work by Verbeek at CIMED proposed that in the EU we indeed should really go to gas networks, and they are available because there are lots of tubings and systems which will be less used in the future for natural gas. So we can really go to integration, and by integration we can really bring biomethane to the transport sector, trucks and cars who are fueled by methane, and that's worthwhile, to very efficient use, district heating for instance, and to achieve CO2 capture and production of green chemicals. Definitely something that is then that we have to extend and to add to our thinking line. And this is the concept that CIMED in Ghent is working on. Take biomass, transport it, go to a petrochemical plant, and by doing this combi of agriculture and anaerobic digestion, you really can open new perspectives in a broad sense, as I discussed. And I also like to say perspectives for these millennials. We have been seeing all these young people over the last half year, and what do we offer to them? Where do we speak to them? My message is, here at this Congress, here in our technology, we should speak out and we should make bridges to the millennials. They are desperately looking to people like you and us to say something in their, which gives them hope. That brings me to my second magic of upgrading CO2. I think it's a very important area, and we see in the literature a lot of things that are happening. For instance, that paper that says, what would it take for renewable powered electrosynthesis using CO2 to displace the petrochemical processes? And the answer is rather complicated, but still it gives hope. It says, look, the conversion efficiency should be above 60%. As engineers, we will get there. Electricity must become below 4 cents. That's more difficult. And very interesting for most of you is, they say, this alone will never make it. We need to couple it to biotech. And I think that is something that we all must take in our minds and look forward to deal with it. My last story deals with something that I have been focusing on in the last years. The dream. The dream of cyclic economy for me is the following. We have wastes. We should capture what is in solution in these wastes through the biofloc technology. You understand me? I invest something. I do what I call priming. I prime so that I don't chop up the molecules. I put it all in microorganisms, which I harvest, and then the harvesting goes through biogas, but it can also go to thermal gasification. But the key point is that here I get immediately, just like in the biofloc technology, recycled water, because everything has been captured. And then here I bring these clean gases. You remember, they went to heaven and are clean. I bring these gases. They are in the concept of the consumer clean. I bring them to an old process, aerobic fermentation. I make single-cell protein, and in that single-cell protein, I capture all these elements and bring them to a new order at the expense of energy. That is very clear. So where are we? There is the organotrophic route, where we bring in clean organics, but maybe, for instance, recovered ammonia. There is the autotrophic route, and in the autotrophic route, you really build up the CO2, you let it react with reactive nitrogen, all or not recovered, and then you have drivers like these to get there, and then what comes out is, depending on your input and your fermentation that you put on, it can be food, feed, it can be organic fertilizer, or it can be also a material composite. Silk is a protein, so you can also kind of transform these materials in that direction. What are the situation? Well, in the terms of the potato wastewaters, we are at this moment at a demo scale in Belgium. We did all kinds of analysis, and all I can say is that they were all very excellent. Even something that we didn't expect was, when we give this to shrimps, they had a much better weight. We would have been happy if they had the same conversion, but they were even better, and they had also a better survival factor because their immunology was stimulated. So we think there is a lot of good things to say there. And there is another example of an organotrophic route, not in our country, but in China, which is on brewery wastewater, and which produces now something like, I think it's a ton dry matter per day that they produce, and that is positive. What is the situation on the autotrophic route? This was a 0.7 cubic meter. We have had good value in the protein, but the transformation, the efficiency was too low, and at this moment we are really thinking to scale it up. We think that we can cope with that, and we will try to scale it up in the fall. Thinking out of the box. I've talked about the easy ones. How about the difficult wastes? I think there I put in a line which Silvio Matassa is now developing. Convert these difficult wastes, this fecal matter, this matter which anyway has to be burned, convert it to quality gas. Can be AD, can be torrefication, can be gasification. Use the gas to produce gas-based quality microbial biomass, SCP, And I stress here each time the element quality. If that quality is not assured through those steps, then you are nowhere. We can make it very complex, but I will not go into the detail, but you can take wastewater, prime it, then have this compromised microbial biomass, which you then have to separate and gasify. But if you gasify this properly, you can do aerobic gas fermentation, and then you can get quality biomass protein. This is what we are working on. How about gasification? Yeah, there is still some work to do, but there is enough indication in the literature that you can gasify biomass to and have a low tar but high hydrogen CO and also ammonia H2S, and depending on the temperature, even phosphine distillation, which could then be used in the fermentation. Of course, there are costs and benefits. I will not hide that drying sludge to gasify is costly. The gasification has a cost. That could come to that cost. There have been a lot of calculations on it, and it says that the maximum that you could get as feed is this. This is a very narrow financial perspective with a lot of simplifications along the line, but I think that the integrated process might become cost neutral and fitting to that concept of cyclic economy. And most of all, I think that we all put our head in the sand if we talk about digestate. We always try to say that it's beautiful and good and fertile, etc., but it is in practice. And for most farmers, it's utter despair. This system could then really solve that problem. Actually, what is new in that whole story of SCP? It existed already from the 70s. Now, however, we have the environmental costs of conventional protein are very high. The conventional protein is soy, and soy, for a major part, is grown in, you know it. So these costs of CO2, burning the Amazon, etc., all of that comes now into perspective. The costs of fishing on the high sea make that protein comes forward. There is a need to design meaningful processes in terms of CO2 avoidance and carbon capture, and I think that the processes, particularly the autotrophic process that we depicted, is in line of that. What is also new, well, we work with microbiomes, and we can apply green hydrogen and syngas as the driver. All of that puts it in a new perspective. Are there applications? This man, you have seen, he has calculated, we have massive amounts of needs for protein, top quality protein, massive amounts for feed. There are massive demands for organic fertilizer and rising because bone meal becomes more difficult. And there is, of course, quite a search for biodegradable products which all could be fed through this line. I've indicated at the beginning we should have a value chain with multiple applications, and I think we have them. We did even work on that concept of Paris. Paris said we have to save so much CO2. Well, if we do that, we made a calculation. If we would solve this, really bring up the CO2 capture that Paris demanded through the system by just working on along the lines that we did, it would cost 500 to 1,000 euro per inhabitant per year. This is a lot, but in the industrialized countries, we pay these days 100 to 300 euro per inhabitant per year as levies for sewage and garbage. So it's much higher, I agree, but it's not an exponent of that. So if we start working on it, it could be very nice. And we also looked into what if we substitute some of the land area, which is now used to make animal feed. And we talked to soil scientists about it, and they first said no. But if you can see it, here is another name. But here is something, this is a real top scientist, conservative as hell. He is not here, so I can say it. And he said, no, I don't want to hear it. And then he started calculating, and we found that 6% of the land area now used for production of animal feed can be redestimated, and 6% of the world agricultural area is this. So we are not talking about peanuts. These lines of rethinking and redesigning open certain perspectives which can have major impacts. I talked about the good things. There are threats. The threats are, as I indicated, that the consumer simply says no. And with the consumer, the regulator. And when they say no, there is no way. So we have not resolved that. Sometimes at night I wake up and I say the consumers or the regulator says no, and then I know that it stops. There are inspiring successes. This is for me an inspiring success. You come to Oostduinkerke, you drink, 50% of the water is directly coming from the sewage treatment plant. That's substantial. And that's in Belgium, and it exists 20 years. Aqua minerals and vitamins, iron sludges and humic acids from drinking water. The Chinese Academy, advanced separation and recovery of heavy metals and ammonia. Good processes which exist. I will not go to too many, but I say there is maybe a new kit on the RR block, and that's gasification, which allows us to then come in a clean way. And there is work going on, and there will be coming a publication along that line by Silvio. So the idea is go to quality gases and integrate them in our resource recovery. That can then be the start of an extended value chain. I have to finish by answering the question that Ilya put. I didn't dare, Ilya, to put 2050. My algorithm stopped with 20 years. My top priority number one is reclaimed water and zero liquid discharge. We must do something on that, and we really have plenty of tools, but we have still a long way to really push it further. But I think this is something we have to really achieve as soon as possible. And then I think we cannot go around it. Our technology, our bio and chemi technology, the thermo and biotechnology combined, have to deal with that CO2 problem. We have tools in our hand, we can do a lot. There is a lot to further develop, but I think it is an issue which will become very prominent in the next 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mark, do you want to also come up? So, maybe a second chance. No, let's first the first chance for Willy. Yeah.
So, Glenn Diger, to both of you, excellent presentations, very thought-provoking. I want to ask each of you to, and Mark, this was really inspired by kind of looking at the past and saying, you know, our basic system will continue into the future. You know, I think success is remembering things to do and remembering things to not do. So I'd ask each of you, in terms of how we've managed water in the past, what are 2 or 3 things that we absolutely should continue to do? What are 2 or 3 things that we should stop doing? And one of my examples is, it wasn't in my time, but the folks that got me going in the industry, up through the 1960s, almost all wastewater treatment plants were energy neutral. I mean, this idea of energy neutrality is not a new thing. What happened was that basically they treated to the extent that they ran out of energy. It was regulations. Now, I think we're making the same mistake with water reuse. And as soon as someone has a concern, rather than talk to them about what really needs to happen, oh, we'll throw in another process. Because we stay in our technological, world rather than actually go talk to people. So that's one that comes to me. But 1 or 2 things that we should continue to do, 1 or 2 things that we've done in the past and we ought to leave behind.
I think overall what works very well is there's all the time discussion about centralized and decentralized, and I don't want to go in that discussion. There's just only in the end an optimization, and there's an optimal size, and there you should aim for. But it's very clear that treating the water too close to the production site of the wastewater will, in one way or another, compromise human health. And the biggest resource which we actually recover, or at least deal with, is human health. And that's, for me, a reason to think that the basic water structure more or less remains the same. There will be catchment areas, there will be aqueducts, there will be sewers. We added the treatment plant the last 150 years in the system to protect the environment better than what people did in the past, but it has also to do with that the load of human society on the natural system, of course, increased with the number of people. So that basic structure will remain. The size of it, in China, 100,000 population equivalents is decentralized plant. That's it's terminology, we should not discuss about that. But the basic structure will be there, and the attention for health. And coming back to water reuse, because it's mentioned a few times, it's very simple. As soon as there is nothing else, people accept it. And Windhoek is probably the best case, which is always nicely forgotten, but that's really the best case, where the whole capital of a country is already for 30 years drinking their own water again, and they are under water stress, and that's the only solution there, and then people accept it. And that's, in Singapore, the acceptance is a bit on different grounds than water shortage. There's some political backgrounds, which people in Singapore very well know, but never express. But also there, it's shown technically it's possible, and as soon as it's really needed. But at the same time, if roughly 90% of the water is used in agriculture, I don't see the utmost need, at least depending on where you are, to by definition reuse the water in the cities. You can also reuse it in agriculture, and it in the end depends very much on functionalities, local, regional things. You will not pump up water on a hill, you will, so it's too much local. The solutions, the optimal size, the optimal solution will be local.
I fully agree. Is that okay? I think I agree with Mark. We cannot afford that at any point somebody starts distrusting the services, that it is not cleaned properly, or that the drinking water would not have the good quality, that this is out. On the other hand, we all know that we deliver it at a price which is very low, and then we have to subsidize in many places. So I think we have to continue to deliver it at a price that it is economic and that it's social. We cannot bring our society so that only a few people have the high quality water. We must continue to do so. But that does not mean that we have to continue to have that supply used for all kinds of practical uses which don't need that quality. So for the future, in one way or another, we have to learn to convince the people that that top quality water, that it will be further delivered to everybody, that this is part of our society and the progress, and that nobody should have shortage of water. But on the other hand, I think reuse of the water and reuse it for purposes where it can be reused, we should put tremendous effort and demonstrate and educate the people that their reuse, which then has a lower cost, is feasible. So I think it's a matter of keeping the quality and the price and the comfort for everybody, so that it's not a luxury, but on the other hand, bringing the burden and the costs that it has now, redirecting it by having reuse in one way or another, and also the things that come out of that water in a way that we can demonstrate to the people that this fits to their concept.
I partly disagree here. That's because the cost of the system is not the water. It's the pumps, the pipes, the things. So as soon as you start, if you at the same time say we need to keep things at a reduced cost, then we have to do reuse in an optimized way. And at the same time, maybe also think about using rainwater in a more efficient way. And certainly most of human population is living near coastal areas where you can use, for instance, seawater for flushing, as they do in Hong Kong, in a very efficient way. And also that you can again nicely integrate it with your cooling systems for the houses. And there are a lot of system integrations, but as said, that's depending on the local geography, what is feasible there, and especially the landscape, because pumping water up is the most expensive part of the whole system. Besides the pipes and the pumps, is the most expensive energy. Yeah.
I won't enter too much in the reuse because I don't agree always with what is said, but maybe we should discuss a bit more on the cascade, because circular economy doesn't say that you are using your own water yourself. It says that your waste can be used by someone else or an activity, and then again and again. So it's important sometimes maybe to work more on who would be interested and for which. And I think the fit for purpose and the notion of cascading, you can have a very pure water, and even if you try to convince people that direct reuse is good, you still have bottled water, and you still have people who, for their kids, buy bottled water. My daughter-in-law is buying bottled water for my grandchild. And I spend hours and hours, but I can't. My kids never drink bottled water, but my grandchildren are going to drink bottled water. So even if you have scientific evidence and things like that, and it's not direct reuse, it's even good water. So, I mean, even if you are very scientific, my feeling is that probably having a more cascade or more adapted reuse and things like that helps to be realistic, and as you said, it's optimum. So if you don't need, because you have water or you can use less water for drinking purpose, why don't we work more on cascading and beefing? Okay.
I agree with you, but I indicated, and I have learned that the hard way, the psychology of the consumer. We need to work more with psychologists, with marketeers, and the ultimate way to do it is to work with examples, with cases where you use it and where you then, after 10 years, demonstrate that it has been okay and that there are no side effects. But lots of people are very suspicious. You need tens of years in order, before people start to believe that this is okay and that is okay, and that you need these test cases. We have to set them out, and then the first questions will be, but are you sure? Are you sure? Do you give guarantee? We never can do this. We have to give years and years of experience. So our governments, we must convince them that we get cases, areas where we test, where we demonstrate, where we have, with the consent of the people who enter in that project, really see what it is and monitor it very carefully. We need examples. You can talk, but psychology, it's no. It comes only with sometimes decades of application, and that the farmer will say, yes, I will use this. My soil is not getting salted. On the long run, it's okay. Farmers will take 10 years before they make up their mind. So we need these test cases, well documented, but we need to push them.
Yeah, I would say, in principle, because you can say we have to do it, at a certain moment as it needed, the public will accept. It's like in Japan, where in the high-rise buildings there is cascading, because the grey water is treated to become toilet water. Simply, the price of water in Japan, due to the shortage of the water, is much higher than in Europe. And it's cost-effective for a project developer to install an MBR unit in the bottom of the high-rise and just have two separate systems. In Europe, the water is available enough, and we can say it's shortage. There is enough water, maybe not for agriculture, but in the context of urban systems and some areas in the south. But as soon as the pressure is there, people start to economically optimize, and then it will work. Or, and that's the other way around, and that's what I partly indicated about, if we have nice products which you can make out of the wastewater, like Vivinite or like PHA, we can use that same emotion and things people have by nature, why they buy bottled water, to create an atmosphere to why they want to use maybe PHA in certain products or for certain products. So understanding that emotion and using that to enhance circular economy is a way, because people are prepared to pay for a nice story or having a good feeling with it. Like with the bottled water, where they rationally know that it's 1,000 times more expensive than what they get from the tap, tastes the same, but still, that label on the bottle is, they pay for it.
One last question.
Thanks, Ilya. Thanks, Mark and Willy, for your inspiring talks. You didn't mention per se, but what is your thoughts about if we start from source-separated waste, for example, in collecting the urine, collecting the fecal matter separately? Does this have, from your point of view, any benefits on the product quality that we can achieve? If you can say something on this, thanks.
I can start with municipal solid waste. When I started my career, to tell people at home to separately collect this was not done. This was ridiculous. I remember the first time that I went to see a truck which separately collected the vegetable waste. I remember clearly that day. This was a white truck, and it worked. And it worked. The people said only that organic matter that to be collected. I couldn't believe my eyes, and it works very well. For instance, in Flanders, this works. We get one of the highest of all in Europe in source-separated collection. And then you can really do something much nicer. So we must continuously propose this, but it doesn't work at all. You must be aware that there are deviations to it, and that for some things it works, but you have to continuously then educate people. It's something that you cannot let loose. It has to be brought into the schools to everybody. But if we can do so, it's the beginning of the cyclic economy, I would say. Yes.
Don't have anything to add here yet.
All right. Then can we please get some slides? So no, you're not done. So we're going to speed up the process a little bit. So we're going to make a quick transition to the Best Practice Award. But before you go, we would like to summarize for the audience. Yeah. So what is the key lesson learned? Right. First of all, to the young water professionals. So in 1 or 2 sentences, what's the key lesson learned for them? Especially in the context of developing technology in the field of research recovery. So maybe Mark can start.
Can you go one slide back? There's this signpost. Take the direction which is not signposted.
That's what my father said. My father said, really, if you go the way that everyone has gone, you will not find much. They have looked it all over. Okay, in addition to that, I think I used a word that I love very much and that I say to the youngsters, serendipity. Always look where the others, you have to look ahead and backward, but never forget to look the sideways. And that's a bit of the same story. It's often from that direction that you suddenly see it, but I'll have to add something. Serendipity means that your mind is prepared. Otherwise, there is no serendipity. Your mind, you must constantly read, come to congresses, see things, talk about things, and then you have a mind which rejects this and that and that, but then suddenly the stone which you didn't want to use, you use to build the next house.
And then wish list. Regulators are in the room. Your wish list with respect to regulation and resource recovery. Mark, what is needed?
First, that the regulators back off as much as possible. Second, that they behave like a shepherd, that they're not trying to regulate each sheep where to go, but sets wide boundaries in which it's good to herd the sheep and to herd the process going. And the typical attitude will be to try for each sheep to designate how it should travel through the field.
I'll speak to them in another way. I have been often angry with them. But after Mark, I can say it this way. These people do their job. They are there, and they are there because society says, be careful, we have to be careful. So these people have to do their job. I understand that. But they should, together with us, try to get what I have called, but there must be an English word, zones where you can experiment. We have not enough experimental zones where they, together with us as scientists and commercial people, can look into the future. They must help us and not immediately say, the computer says no. They must help us to find zones where we can cooperate. That is the answer, I think. They have their tasks, we have their tasks, but the public at the end and the policymakers at the end have a responsibility. So let's work much more, not to say no, or there will be another so many million of research that are needed. No, let's find areas of experimental freedom. But where we document everything, very good.
Okay, maybe to nuance a bit what you just said, because I think what environmental engineers usually forget, once they have developed something bright new, they forgot why the regulation once was put in place. And there are cases like Seveso and the Sandoz fire, etc., where it has been seen that things accumulate into cycles, and most of the regulation is due to these incidents where the environmental people were the ones who were driving this kind of regulations, not the regulators themselves. Just to prevent PCBs, dioxins, to go through the whole system. And it's good to realize where this law comes from, and if you then don't agree with it, go back to why the law was there and try to change the regulation instead of stating that for my nicely recovered material the regulation should not count, but for anybody else it should still hold. That's not the way it works. You either say the regulation is overdoing it in general for society, or you behave the same way as anyone else who brings a product into the market on society.
All right. In 1 or 2 sentences, what should the role of academia be?
Create ideas, potential, create a workforce which the coming 30 years can develop all these things in practice, because I don't think universities should develop in the end technology. I think that's the 2 main things. Create young people who can have the skills to change things in society and implement them, whatever is going to happen, because you don't know that during the education, and create ideas. And stop when the term pilot plant comes into vision, to keep that inside university, make sure it's outside.
Academia, I think, be inspired, dream, never think that it has been exhausted. The world in front of us is fractal. Each time that you see something, you think, I have it here. If you go a little bit deeper, you see another crystal, and you see another crystal of the crystal. It's fractal. Its knowledge is endless, so believe in it, and believe me, we need academia to do that. In industry, it is not possible. You are in an excellent spot to make things progress. And if I'm not an economist, but if I understand the wealth of the nations, the book, it is, if we are now all so much better than all those generations before us, it is because we have created new insights and new potentialities, and it came through knowledge. So I think academia has a terrific responsibility, but also a terrific opportunity. Keep going.
All right, then we skip this one. We skip this one. We talked about the future, both of you in your presentations. So 1 or 2 sentences maybe, and that's it. Mark?
We cannot grasp the future. It goes, it's stochastic. May I say it that way?
Keep it a green field.
Yeah, it goes, can go all directions, and believe in it.
And yeah, this slide, I looked for roads to Venice, but I couldn't find it. So I think this reflects a little bit both presentations. Resource Recovery 2050, I'm pretty sure it's going to be there, but as you saw in these presentations today, we went from earrings to fish it. There are many varieties, many options that we can follow, but in the end, we all want to end up in Venice is resource recovery. So, with that, thank you very much for the great presentations. Thank them again, please. Yes, okay. Yep. Then Willy has to come back because we talked about the past and the future and try to inspire people, but it's also to celebrate and congratulate people. So I think this is really the third or second award? Third award?
Can you do it?
Yeah. Yes. So you're the inventor of it, so the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the third time that by the activity of IWA and also Watershare at the occasion of the Resource Recovery Conference, which was created 2013-14 within the IWA, that we also give the Best Practice Award, and this year we have it again. I should recall that the Best Practice Award in 2015 went to the Netherlands. It was given to Aqua Minerals for a calcite type of development, the calcite pellet. In 2017, it went to South Korea. There was a company, POSCO Engineering, together with the city of Amyang, where there was a water treatment with an absolutely fabulous good energy balance in the system. And this, for this conference, we asked again to people to submit, to nominate, to send in. The selection criteria are innovative character of the best practice in resource recovery, replication potential, positive environmental impact, active cooperation with all stakeholders within the value chain of the recovered resource, and of course, a positive business case. If I can have the next slide, I should give you the names of the people who have worked hard to make this selection. I chair this through the IWA. Glenn, the former president of IWA and who is here present, was also on the committee. Heidi de Klippelaar, also from the USA. Then we had Jurg Keller from the University of Queensland, Australia. Staffan Philipsen, I don't know if Staffan is here, no? But I think from the Swedish Environmental Research Institute, but Miriam is here. Miriam, I thought she was, or she's coming anyway, International Water Management of Sri Lanka. These were the people. We got a total of about 20 submissions, of which we then made a short list of about 6. And I can tell you that they covered topics like cellulose, like salt, like heat and cold, like ammonia and metals, and humic acids, and of course also phosphate. So it took us some Skyping, some discussion, some messages back and forth, and some considerations, and then we came out with, of course, a winner, which we are happy to announce now. The winner is actually a winner because a technology, it's a kind of multi-technology which recovers many things to a maximum amount, and that is already quite a statement. It's novel, it has not been, as far as we know, put into a pilot configuration as it is now. It operates at this moment at 1,000 cubic meters a day, and it recovers something like 500 kilograms of a very valuable resource. All this, the technicality, and moreover, the way it was absolutely nicely presented to us, gave us the idea that we should give this prize to the Technical University of Berlin, and Professor Geisen, who is here in the room, will then come and take the award. We give now the award, of give Professor Geisen first. No, he gets it now, and I should ask Mrs. President of the IWA to come with me and to be on the picture for this honorable event. Professor Geisen, you get the chance to present your work, but we will give you first this very heavy recycled medal. And congratulations. Okay, so here we go. And you have now the occasion to present shortly your work.
Shortly means 10 minutes. And I'm trying to keep in time. First of all, I'm very honored to receive this prize. And I'm switching now from me and I to we, because we are a team. And the team manager is amongst us. It's a young water professional. It's Marlena Kieselbach. Please stand up, and a special applause to her. And that's the background for research partners, for industrial partners, for demonstration sites, that mean end users. And we have different institutions, Technical University of Berlin. We have the DECHEMA in Frankfurt, located in Frankfurt is an association. We have the Fraunhofer Institute of Solar Systems in Freiburg, and we have the KIT, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Additionally, we have plant construction companies like Werle, Umwelt, TerraWater, producing or building evaporation plants. We have the Solar Spring company producing membrane distillation plants, and Deucom, specialist in electrodialysis. Additionally, we have applied in different fields of application. One is food industry, that's the German Extract Coffee Works, located in Berlin. MEWA, which is industrial laundry, spread all around Europe. We have the Client, I guess most of you know the company, and L'Oreal, last but not least. So, yes, to tell you a little bit about the story, how we came up to generate this project. It was initiated by a European-funded project, E4Water, which dealt with recycling of industrial water. And in many publications, while applying membrane-based processes, we are missing the arrow which is showing the concentrates which we are producing. And concentrates, at the end of the day, are something like a mirror, and they are the brain of water. Very important to note. And it's easy to show how it's working in industrial process. It's more complex in nature. However, we just observing during the last decades that water has this memory. We're discussing about trace pollutants. We're discussing about microplastics. We're discussing about certain chemicals. And all this is showing us, not directly, but indirectly, in each and every place where we're recycling water, that we are adding this substance into water. And by good luck, we decided to stay within the industrial water cycle. However, it's challenging too, but not as challenging as in the whole water cycling and dealing with society, as already discussed. However, that's also an output of the project finally. We know that salts are added at the very beginning, while not only salt, but also other chemicals are added while producing process water. Finally, due to the industrial process, also salts and other substances, not only salts, but also other substances are introduced into the water. And already mentioned by Mark, it's very essential to keep in mind that water is the most important energy carrier, not only in industry, but in general. And keep in mind, we are using huge amounts of water for cooling applications. It's very simple industrial processes because you can make a very simple energy balance. You know how much energy is required, for example, to produce steel. And this energy finally has to be get rid of from the industrial process, which is basically done, can be done in several ways, but basically done and most economically done by evaporation of water. However, the water recycling in general, which is shown here, the concentrate treatment, the brine processing, we are concentrating here on the brine processing and the reuse of salts is challenging. Why it's challenging? Always the same question, the value of what we are producing. I don't know whether one of you has an idea what 1 ton of sodium chloride, high purity, costs. Someone around who has an idea? 1 ton of sodium chloride. Not for, let's say, for our consumption. I have some salt with me from our process, and I will show you later on a picture about from this salt. But nevertheless, about a couple of 10 euros per ton, 30, 40, 50 euros, depending a little bit where you are and what you're doing. That's very, very low. On the other hand side, that's what we also evaluated, there are salts of a higher value. However, what we have to do is to separate the salts. But, and this is what is most important, what can be most easily implemented into industrial process, industrial water cycling or recycling process, is to transfer this knowledge from the concentrate treatment, from the membrane processes, back towards into the industrial process and also into the water treatment, showing the colleagues from the processes that these and those substances should be substituted. It's much cheaper than the end of the pipe solution, which we are dealing with actually. So that's a benefit we have for sure, but maybe we can use industrial water as a best practice example in order to transfer this knowledge into a broader scheme, into the whole water cycle at the end of the day, as a vision for 2050, maybe 2100, I don't know. But we are working on it, and therefore we developed this process, brine processing. Basically, it looks very complex. So it's first of all membrane bioreactor. It's a reverse osmosis for pre-concentration. It's, I think, already known all around the world. But then we are talking about the super concentrates, which can be defined. By us, it was defined by a total dissolved, dissolved solids per content of 8%. And then we are moving into very complex processes. I will not bore you with a lot of details on these processes, but at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind, for example, we are starting with about 1,400 cubic meters per day, and we're talking here at this point at about 100 cubic meter per day, 150 cubic meter per day. So the amount of water is gradually decreased. And finally, if you take the kilowatt hours consumed or used for this process, you have always to keep in mind we are recycling water. And additionally, we're recycling water here from the concentration, further concentration steps. So this is a demonstration plant, conventional configuration, again, membrane bioreactor followed by reverse osmosis and the reuse application, the permeate, but we have to care, and that's what we did for the concentrate. First of all, we have a mixture of everything in the water. So that means organics, inorganics, salts, heavy metals, everything. So it's a mixture of everything which we have to separate, and one of the major steps is to separate organics from the salts. And this can be done, for example, depending on the application, by nanofiltration. Then electrolyzers can be installed, and membrane distillation, and so on, and finally ending up by crystallization. So that's the example of the coffee-producing company, which is applying conventional process again, reverse osmosis, producing. That's the raw water, looks like coffee. So we started very early with laboratory and bench scale investigation, just brewing coffee. It's nothing else. So the wastewater which is discharged by those companies is more or less coffee. However, it's ending up in the concentrate in a strong coffee, not an espresso, but a stronger coffee, and then finally looking like coffee powder at the end of the day. These are the salts. That's a mixture of organics and salts, which you finally have to dispose. And the costs for disposals are strongly varying, so between, let's say, 100 euros per ton up to 800 euros per ton, depending where you are. And therefore, this is dramatically influencing the whole process. I didn't talk about minimal liquid discharge. This is another story, but from my point of view, it's not a solution. So we have to move towards zero liquid discharge, in particular in the industry. It takes some time because it's costly, I know, but nevertheless, minimal liquid discharge ends up, again, with the concentrate. And the discharge of those concentrates into municipal wastewater treatment plants is not sustainable at all, because we're finally ending up with substances which are hardly biodegradable. I would not say non-biodegradable, it's depending on the system, but they are hardly biodegradable. We have also high salt concentration, and therefore we have to care for those concentrates and not to discharge them even into the environment, which is sometimes taking place. So what we did in our project, and we generated these kind of salts, sodium carbonate, sodium chloride, and potassium nitrate. Again, the benefit or the value of those substances, of those salts, is not very high. So it will not, basically, we will be not able to finance the whole process by the sales of those salts. It's just an additional benefit. But on the other hand side, we have the disposal costs. Now we have the disposal costs, which can be very high, and therefore we have two benefits while doing so, and we have to make a complete economic evaluation, which we already did. Additionally, it's a question of sustainability, and I'm very happy that you have one session here addressed to sustainability. We are also applying here LCA and LCC for this process. And what is missing, still missing, is an evaluation of the salts discharge into the surface water and in groundwater too. So, short conclusion, concentrates, as I already addressed, are the brain and the mirror of water. Therefore, we have to care for everything which we are adding into water, additionally heat. Recovery of salts and selected organics is feasible, what we demonstrated. Selective separation resalting, that means generating salts which are not present in the original wastewater, but which might have a higher value, can be a solution. And purification is also essential. The recovery starts with the process water production, continues via the production, wastewater treatment, recycling, and concentrate processing. So in each and every step, we have to ask ourselves whether or not we should add this or those chemicals, or we should even not add any chemicals at all. Yeah, and extraction of high valuable product is rarely possible, but recycling into the value chain is required. And I'm very happy to discuss with you about the continuation of this approach at the next conference, which is called Water for Industry and taking place in Nanjing. It's an IWA conference, end of March next year, and on the Industrial Water Conference, which will take place in November next year, 2020, in Frankfurt. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So there is no best way to close an opening ceremony with a very good cocktail. So thanks very much for your presentation, and again, congratulations. Some logistic information. We have the welcome cocktail in the poster area, and tomorrow, 7:45 and 8:45, there will be boats related to the conference. So there are 3 boats from San Marco. And the session will start at 9. So, of course, we suggest to take the boat at 7:45, but there will be 2 boats available to be here on time for people that are not sleeping here. Thanks again, and enjoy the cocktail.